Let's start the ball rolling. I'm trying to, oops, I think somebody is annotating my slide. Just now it was okay. Okay, all right, good. 2020, an unprecedented year. So 2020 has come and passed. 12 months have passed, and we are now in the new year 2021. A lot of things happened in 2020, but a lot of things were not in our control. Unfortunately, because of the arrival of the coronavirus COVID-19. And today, what I like to do is basically to share with you, some experience during the arrival of coronavirus COVID-19. After that, we'll look at the paralysis of the worldwide economic activities, what has happened due to this animal of novel coronavirus. And thereafter, we'll look at the impact on the real estate industry. And last but not least, we'll look at the conclusion and some questions which really we have to answer on top of whatever questions you have for me later. Okay? All right, let's move along. Now, the arrival of the COVID-19 virus was already, in fact, visible in the last quarter of 2019. So, of course, at that time, it was actually in China. And then in January, the first case was detected in Malaysia. And then after that, it became like, basically a blow up when we had the WHO announcing it as an epidemic. Okay, later on, we went into the movement control order in several phases. The MCO, and we had the CMCO. We had also EMCO for those areas which actually was quite severe, affected by the infection. And after that, we had the RMCO, which later on became CMCO back again for Selangor, Putrajaya, Kuala Lumpur, and Negeri Sembilan. And as you know, at this point in time, we're still in CMCO for Selangor, Putrajaya, Kuala Lumpur, and Negeri Sembilan. And it looks as if that things are getting worse. Now, even worse, I think in other countries, especially in the US, in the UK, a lot of infections have gone through. And last night I just had um, the news that my son also is having it. So I guess being far away from my son in London, we can only pray for their well-being. Inshallah, if you all don't mind, let's pray for the students in the UK and other countries for them to go through the pandemic safely. Okay, let's look at the paralysis of the economic activities worldwide. Now, I'm sure everybody has heard that the economic activities have stopped in most countries. Everywhere became quite quiet. In fact, very quiet. In Malaysia, suddenly dolphins were appearing in Penang, under the bridge. Suddenly, we have also crocodiles coming up, in Shah Alam. Things have become so slow that the air became clean. There's a lot of pollution which stopped. So I think it did a bit of good also. But unfortunately, when we look at the economic side, it was not too good for a lot of countries. Even Malaysia was not spared. As you can see, the AMS GDP forecast, if you were to have a look at what we have in the graph in table 2, earlier the official target was to be between minus 2.0 to 0.5% as projected by Bandagara back in April 2020. But in actual fact, in quarter 3 2020, it dropped by 2.7%. So you can imagine, how bad it is actually, has been for 2020. And if you look at the fact that all our borders have been closed, even tourism have actually dropped. No foreign currency coming in, no visitors, no spending at our retail malls, And as you can see, Malaysia relies on almost 14% of the GDP on tourism. So with the hotels unoccupied most of the time in 2020, and the malls half empty because of the lack of tourists, our GDP was actually affected quite badly. So, what about the real estate market trend in Malaysia? Now, I think everybody is quite aware that we have already been facing a lot of issues since 2016. And if you look at the graph in the service apartment existing stock diagram there, you'll be able to see that there's a lot of stock in Kuala Lumpur, in Johor, and also in Selangor. This has been going on for some time. Okay, and then if you look at the unsold residential properties by price, you'll be able to see that since 2017 fourth quarter, it has been on the rise because of the completion of a lot of projects. So basically, the real estate market was already, I would say, going through a correction, and of course, price spiraled up, and at the same time, the oversupply was an issue, and the fact that affordability was already an issue showed that basically the property market was not too healthy. And suddenly we had the pandemic hitting us as early as early January in 2020. And of course, we'll be very concerned to see what exactly will transpire from there on. We are already now in 2021. So there's a lot of things in our minds. How will the economy fare next few months? Will the property market actually achieve good performance? And also, will we be able to still buy or afford to buy properties moving forward? So all this we'll try to unravel whilst we are actually sharing all this information and also the experience on what's happening during this pandemic period. Okay, when we look at the Malaysian House Price Index, MHPI, you'll be able to see that the trend is actually dropping. Okay, everywhere it's dropping. So as it is, everything seems to be going south for the time being. But of course, this is a moment of correction. It's not only in Malaysia, it's also everywhere else in the world. This probably is an opportune time for the country to go through some kind of correction in order for us to create a base for us to go up further later. Okay. Now, of course, it all depends on how the economic fares after this. So all factors, including tourism, including manufacturing, and also business activities, they need to come back to close to normal in order for us to really actually look into improvement in the property market. Okay, let's look at property transactions. If you look in third quarter 2020, although the transactions have increased in quarter 3 2020 compared to quarter 3 2019, 7.4%, the value of transactions in fact dropped. So basically, what does this show us? It shows us that basically there are still transactions. People are still buying. People are still buying, albeit at lower prices, and that is why it translates to lower value of transactions. Okay. But of course, at the same time, the yearly change also dropped up minus 2.4%. Okay. Okay. Now, what are we looking at when we look at the impact on the real estate industry? If you look at the word, the term that we've been looking at all this while, the new norm. The new norm has in fact come upon us, as part of our lives now. Okay. What is happening under this new norm? It's the fact that we have to no longer shake hands, with people we love or our friends, our colleagues. We no longer can walk around without a mask on. And if we were to go into the office or any shops or anywhere, that actually welcomes the public. We need to check our temperature. So all these are actually part of our life now, you know. And of course, at the same time also, we need to distance ourselves from everyone. When we go into lift, when we go on the escalators, or basically waiting for public transportation or riding in public transportation, everybody needs a bit more space now, in order for us to be able to avoid the infection. Okay. Now, social distancing also has resulted in a lot of other things. We are spending more time at home. I think most of you are actually learning from home or anywhere. Now, the keyword is no longer work from home, it's actually work from anywhere. We are also now, staying away from public places. My daughter used to ask me to take her out to shopping malls and all that. Nowadays, she says, okay, let's stay home, be safe, and we spend more time on online shopping instead, and every day, it's half a dozen of visits by the Grab food or delivery by JNT, coming to the house instead of us going out there to the shops. We are also, in fact, having less human contact. A lot of people don't want to meet us. A lot of meetings are now basically done online, and in fact, payments also are made without touching. In some places you'll see the sign saying no cash, card only. So e-wallets are more important now. And then it came at a very opportune time when they were promoting it a lot towards the end of 2019, and now it becomes part of our transactions, especially for online transactions. We are all dealing with e-commerce now. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of home deliveries, and everybody is like, queuing up and waiting for lorries to come to deliver their groceries, the even medicine, and even for their daily essential goods. Okay, and nowadays also most of us are communicating more using community portal or the social media. And this is how, in fact, now we are living it. And this is our new norm. Okay, this is our new norm. It's not only in Malaysia, it's everywhere in the world we are facing this. I can't seem to move the slide. Okay, is somebody annotating? Sorry, I think somebody managed to get into my slide just now to annotate. Okay, all right. Okay, now, what are we looking at as well now, going through major change? It's actually the usage of space. We are working from home now. That means one no longer need to be close to the workplace. Okay, we have workspace at home, but this is limited, and we always need to be isolated from the living space. For instance, today, as you can see, I'm at the office. I've got a nice background, with all my, memorabilia and my awards and all that, like on the cupboard behind me. But a lot of people at home, they find it very difficult to find a nice background, and we are always thinking about, okay, let's do a virtual background. Okay, we put it green background so that we can put something else. When I'm on Zoom, my background is actually the beach. The wave is actually coming in and out, and it's quite animated. Okay, and this is part of our lives now. We want to be a bit more, I would say, presentable, and we want to look professional as well, although we are working from home. If you are actually working for certain GLCs, every morning when you're working from home, you have to switch on your Microsoft Team in the morning, and there's a camera there which detects your presence. If after a certain time you are missing from the screen, your office will be able to detect that you are actually not in front of the PC or the laptop. That means they will be able to know that you're not actually doing work. So that's how advanced it is nowadays. And now I would say, if you were to actually look at the working space, um, if you go back to the office, a lot of offices now are too cramped up, and they are not able to fit everybody in. So that's why, because of the social distancing requirements, usage of space has become a premium. And basically, they can only actually have certain number of people, probably even less than half of the normal population, working population, which can actually be at the office. And this is where the workspace needs to be reconfigured. A lot of people are also doing online studies. I'm sure you're having online classes nowadays, where you need also some peace and quiet, in order for you to be able to study. Now, if you are sharing the space with a sibling or you have a roommate, of course it becomes a bit more difficult. And that's why now a lot of people are looking at how we can actually utilize space comfortably for us to accommodate all these requirements and the needs. Okay, new developments perhaps have to have a look at it as well. Okay, now a lot of people also are doing business operations at home, doing online business. We are all aware that a lot of people have become unemployed. VSS, MSS, some companies have wound up, and basically some companies are not even paying salaries for a few months. Okay, and a lot of people now have had to leave their full-time job and work from home, doing business online. So this is the part where, if you don't have space in the house to keep all the goods, I mean, you might be doing drop shipping, but of course you still need space, storage space, to keep your goods and products, and this becomes a burden in our living environment. Okay, and now a lot of things are e-commerce driven. The demand is for e-commerce. A lot of things are moving towards that. If you watch the papers, there are a lot of developers and investors coming in, looking into development of logistic centers, distribution centers, and also industrial space. And this is very important, because the increase in online business has created this demand. There's also worry about contracting the disease by touching exposed surface. Okay, so contactless function is important for us to avoid. I just got to know from a friend, the whole family actually is in hospital just because they actually use the same pen as somebody who actually got infected. So by everyone using the same pen at a particular government office, they were actually exposed to the surface of the pen and they are infected. And same thing with the lifts, you don't know how regular the cleaners have got to wipe, clean, and sanitize the lift buttons, the escalator handrails, and also the staircase rails. There's a lot of cleaning and sanitizing that has to be done for this. And again, a lot of people now either are at their parents' place or their parents have been brought to stay with them. So homes are now multi-generational, and we have to be able to accommodate more family members. And this is creating certain stress on the existing living conditions that we have, because now, the place has become cramped, there's less privacy, and therefore usage of space have become a luxury, and a premium for some people. Again, it becomes a bit more difficult now for me to change. Okay. Right now, with building and properties to be managed and maintained, we need to ensure that the operations is efficient. A lot of investors own a lot of properties, shopping malls, office buildings, and even business parks, and they all need to be managed and maintained. Now, the issue we have, of course, is always that because the building is being occupied, there are visitors also at the same time, and third parties coming. The building services must be maintained well to avoid issues in terms of breakdown, as well as health and safety issues. There's a lot of concerns also by property managers. For instance, we always have to implement the screening for infected persons. We have to do it very, very diligently every day without fail. And then there's also a lot of technology-driven initiatives that we need to adopt and adapt to in order for us to ensure safety and health of residents and the public generally. And because of this, we have to spend a bit more money. And there's more expenditure for sanitization, to buy the chemicals, to buy the equipment for it, and also to have the personnel to do it. And the personnel has to wear PPE to protect themselves. And in fact, if they were hospitalized or they have to go for swab test, that could be very expensive as well. And this is the fear of certain employers as well. Now, we also see that there's a lot of avoidance of human contact. That means we need to do things contactless, and therefore now there's a lot of usage of drones for inspections, for delivery all over the world. But in Malaysia now, there's some restrictions where if you need to use drone, you have to apply for approval from the CAM because of health, for safety reasons. So all these are actually part of our practice in during the pandemic, and I believe it will continue for some time in the future as well, because the pandemic is not going to end overnight. It will take some time, even after the vaccines have been introduced. Okay, let's look at property investment model. You know, we have real estate investment trust. We have boutique fund managers. We also have the big national sovereign funds like PNB and also QAP, etc. They have been investing in properties for a long time and have been relying on the returns from such properties. My company itself is actually the manager for REIT asset portfolio for the last 4 years. This is now our fifth year now, and we've had to face the risk of drop in occupancy rate, and we've lost. Our client has lost a lot of income, and of course, and this has reflected lower value. Therefore, there's a lot of supplementing of revenue needs to be done. So you need to go into creative ideas on how to counter the shortfall due to the rental discounts being given and also rebates. There's also need for us now to rely less on human and to go into technology. So nowadays, a lot of people are investing in smart buildings, and this is where the Internet of Things enabling a lot of functions to be done immediately and also without the risk of infection. Okay, because of all this vacant space that has been created due to the pandemic, people are actually closing down businesses or closing temporarily. Some spaces have been vacated. So owners or property investors need to look into the alternative use for such space. As I mentioned earlier, online business or e-commerce has actually been on an increase. So perhaps this has to be considered also as part of the alternative use rather than leaving the buildings empty. For investors in order for them to be able to service their loans to the banks or to the financiers. Now, there's also need, now for investors to look into repositioning of buildings and usage. And this is very important because perhaps some buildings now are no longer achieving economy of scale or has actually run out of its life cycle and it's no longer attractive. And in fact, during the pandemic, the tenants would probably be looking at newer buildings and better deals in other buildings. So this is very important. And we've seen some deals in 2020 whereby buildings are being acquired on redevelopment basis. That means whatever they are being used for now is not as valuable as the highest and best use that it could be used moving forward. So this is part of what investors have in mind now to actually create value. And of course, a lot of investors now are trying to attract tenants, to take up space. So they are giving certain incentives, to add value to the property so that it will attract the tenants. And for the existing tenants, investors or landlords are facing the loss of tenants. So it's important also for us to look at a strategy for tenant retention. So now, if you look at the situation, property investment model may have to evolve, and perhaps part of it being revamped as well, for us to be able to look at new opportunities and how we can actually improve the value of our property, and by perhaps making sure that income is not disrupted. Okay, now what about property marketing? Property marketing actually has evolved and it will continue to evolve. A lot of people are using the digital and information communication technology (ICT) to market properties. I believe people like Maseng, SP Setia, and EcoWorld have been doing this during the pandemic. They use certain tools to have a walkthrough for their customers. Some people who are actually dealing with other type of goods such as cars, Mercedes, Benz, BMWs have also done done their marketing using digital formats, and this has switched the market quite successfully. There's also the fact that now people are looking at different things in the market. Okay, that means they are looking at what could be the in thing or the trend to address the concerns during the pandemic. So new developments in the future will need to evolve, to change. And this is where we are looking at the USPs. So new projects in the future will need to look at the needs which can address or accommodate the concerns that we had during the last 1 year. So for instance, a lot of people were staying at home. The broadband was not so stable. Everybody was using the same broadband infrastructure. The 5G is yet to be fully rolled out, implemented. So a lot of congestion, and a lot of people have suffered due to the fact that there's no internet coverage in their parts of the city or towns. I was in Shah Alam in Section 22 recently. I was very surprised to see that there was no stable internet coverage, leading to people struggling to actually using their handphone and to take calls. And in fact, now in Sabah and Sarawak are suffering also. Now, if you have been watching and reading a lot on what is happening during the pandemic period, what has been happening in the US. The US now is moving away from fiber optic broadband infrastructure for developments and for communication. They are looking at satellite internet coverage. So people like Tesla, for instance, have launched 1,000 satellites the last 1 year. And by June this year, it is expected that they will roll out the first satellite internet for the whole of the US. The government has given them 885 million US dollars to make this happen. Okay. Now, as I said earlier, we also have our extended family staying with us during this pandemic period, so that we can help each other. So basically, now we are looking at multi-generational accommodation being of essential. This is where we are looking at parts of the house suitable for occupants from the age of a baby right up to the senior citizens and the elderly. Okay, and the house has to be fitted in such a way that, in fact, it's a lifetime accommodation in the future. That means, from the day you are married until you actually get old, the house still suits you. Okay, there's also need for more space for home office. So developments will look into this as part of their gimmick, as part of their feature of their development in the future. And a lot of studies have been conducted in the US and UK. A lot of people are actually spending more time looking for properties which are away from the city with a lot more space, recreational space for their recreational activity. So this has become something of a requirement also in Malaysia. So those developments which have got a lot of green and a lot of space to enjoy seem to be in demand. And a lot of issues we had during the pandemic period also is because of the exposure to exposed surfaces like lift buttons, doors, and also railings and things like that. So now developers are also looking into the contactless functions. You know, people like Gamuda Land, for instance, are looking into all this already for their new developments. And of course, the most important part is hygienic design features. So how do we achieve this? So all these are going to become the USPs of new developments. And this is what is going to actually drive development in the future. Okay, now, conclusion. Okay, conclusion. In fact, just to share with you, there are a lot of questions that you might have in mind, but for us here together, online, and also for everyone out there moving forward, there are a number of questions which we need to address before we can see where the market is going to head. There are a lot of factors which we have to consider in order to understand how the real estate industry will fare the next 12 months, next 6 months, or even the next 3 years. And this all depends, on the following questions. So the first one I like to pose is that, are the effects of the pandemic going to be temporary or permanent? Now, the permanency of such pandemic, we can see already it's going to be part of our lives. Already we see youngsters when they are infected with the virus, their antibody is stronger. They can actually avoid severe attacks, and a lot of them recover faster. But for the elderly, if they have any underlying illness or medical issues, they tend to be a lot more at risk. Okay, but again, same thing as the flu before. We had the bird flu, we had SARS, MERS-CoV, and the J encephalitis, J encephalitis, JE, and all these in fact have already been addressed by vaccine, and the vaccine has already arrived at the shores of certain countries, and we can see that people are putting a lot of hope in this vaccine in order for us to return to the old norm. But mind you, this virus is quite resilient. It has been mutating, so there are a lot of probably potential issues moving forward. So if we are able to say or to actually tell that the effects is going to be permanent or temporary, this will in fact affect how we are going to do things in the future. Whatever I shared with you earlier will be part of what we have to do in the future in the real estate industry. Okay. Now, next question. With unemployment, salary cuts, business failures, and job uncertainty, are people still able to afford to buy property? This has been a question for a lot of people. It's actually a big responsibility, financial responsibility and commitment for us to buy properties. And basically, you must have enough financial resources to be able to do it. If we talk about the millennials or the young working population, they are at the start of their business, start of their career. They might have limited funds. Okay, and when they get unemployed or they get salary cuts, then basically their income has been affected. A lot of people also have gone through business failures. Some have wound up, some have gone bankrupt. So this will also affect the future affordability. And a lot of people are very worried because of the job uncertainty. And this is where it's going to affect some of those buyers out there, especially the youngsters. So unless the economy actually picks up and we improve the employment conditions, that means more employment can be provided and people can make a living to be able to meet their commitments, then perhaps, the issue of affordability will continue to be there, but at an accelerated effect, because of the fact that it's no longer affordable housing that we require, but in actual fact, the financial affordability itself. Okay. Okay, now the next part, with less spending on vacation, shopping, and entertainment, do people now have more disposable income to invest in housing? So what we've seen, in fact, during June period right up to September, the moratorium period was in place, in enforce, and basically what has happened is that a lot of people have got more money in their pockets because they don't have to pay their bank loans or the high purchase loan for their cars. Now, what have they done? They actually have gone into the stock market, most of them. And a lot of them now have got investment there. Some have made it, but some, I understand now, may have already locked in their disposable income at the stock market and are not able to utilize the funds that they have actually locked there. So, unless they can actually cash in their holdings and their whatever they have committed on in terms of investment, there could be a question also whether or not moving forward they will be able to invest further in housing. Now, a lot of people now who are looking for properties are mainly those who are upgrading and also at the same time trying to relocate to better amenity locations, and due to the fact that there's a lot of accessibility, fluid accessibility in terms of highways and public transportation, LRT and KTMB. So because of that, I think some of them will be wise enough to save all this extra disposable income to be able to invest in a good property outside the city. Okay, now, next question. Will the uncertainty cause significant decline in economic activity in cities, making short-term rental properties no longer feasible? When we talk about short-term rental properties, it's to do with hotels, with homestays, and also properties which are used as Airbnb accommodation. So all this economic activity has actually reduced the consumption by the population. So because of that, a lot of these properties, which used to be very lucrative, because with short-term rental properties, the owners or the landlords can make a lot more money than before. So because of that, they tend to invest in a lot more such properties. But unfortunately now, we are aware that a lot of these investors or owners of such properties are not really doing very well, and they have the challenge to keep up their payment to the banks. So, if everybody is keeping away from the city and we have less economic activity in the cities, nobody will want to stay in the city. We don't even have tourists at the moment. So that is another challenge that we have to address moving forward. Okay, next question. With less offices operating and more lease agreements being terminated, what will be the alternative use of this space? So, a lot of offices now have downscaled their team. Some have surrendered back their spaces and asked for early termination. And some are, in fact, acquiring more space. More space because they really need their staff or the employees to come back to work. But in order to do that, they must have enough space. They must have enough space to accommodate all the staff coming back to work physically. So because of that, for those offices which were already before classified as grade A, that would have actually required the provision of at least 150 square feet per head count in the office. But a lot more lower grade buildings have dense staffing and less space available, and it is almost impossible for them to fit in all their staff coming back for physical work. So this is where some of these offices will have to be reconfigured. Of course, by taking more space, they will be able to accommodate their staff coming back because of the social distancing requirements. But at the same time, they will have to pay a bit more for the rental as well. So unless economic and business activity improves, this could be a challenge for most businesses. Now, with offices being a lot more vacant due to the terminations and also due to the closing down of businesses, are we actually going to look at some repositioning for the office buildings? You know, what can they be used for? So we need to see what exactly the market is moving forward to. And I mentioned earlier, e-commerce and also online businesses have thrived the last 1 year, and even for the last few years, but it's even more active during the pandemic. So perhaps the storage space and of course working area for fabrication of light industry could be solution to this, and this has to be looked at closely. And last but not least, I have a lot of questions that we have to answer, but I'd like to also explore. Oh, I can hear some roosters crowing. It's good to know that they are here to listen. Okay, last but not least, will e-commerce or online business activity result in bricks and mortar shops and shopping malls closing down in the long term? But will there be more logistical space to be in demand? And this is also something that we have to watch. We have to watch and see whether or not we are able to forecast the requirement for space in the future. We need to look at what would be in demand, especially for areas which are prime and also with scarcity of land available for horizontal developments. Perhaps some developments will now go vertical due to the scarcity and high cost of land. Okay. Now, with all these questions that I've shared with you, if we can find the answers to it, we should be able to forecast how the market will move and how the real estate industry will evolve or perhaps accommodate what is happening due to the pandemic. Now, this is where a lot of analytical studies has to be done. And this is where data analytics and the usage of Internet of Things to collate all this information and data, and for data analytics to be applied so that we can look at certain aspect of the data in order for us to formulate the forecast for the future. And of course, when we have big data available, that will help us a lot. And of course, with the presence of artificial intelligence or AI, a lot of things can be done. A lot of things can be more than accurate in terms of forecasting. And this is where it will help us to formulate the future. Okay, with that, come to the... Oh, hold on. I'm trying to go to the last slide. I'm not so sure why. Okay, sorry. There you are. Okay, so I've come to the end of the slide. So I'd like to pass back the mic to Tuan Dr. Surveyor Ahmad Shazrin, and perhaps for Professor Surveyor Technologist Dr. Hadi also to present his paper. Thank you very much again, everyone, for listening. And I hope I'm not too boring for you to listen to. And I hope to listen to some questions that you have at the end of the session. Thank you again. And wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And thank you very much for listening.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Surveyor Azman. Okay, thank you very much, Surveyor Azman, for such informative presentation just now. I'm sure you have shared a lot of things about what is happening in our real estate market. And also, I'm very interested with your several questions that you have addressed in your last slide. and also answering them, and it gives us insights on what is happening and what is likely to be happen what likely to be happening in the future. So to proceed now, I want to yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Regarding the questions, okay, sorry, before I pass to Prof. Hadi. Okay, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of after Prof. Hadi has presented his presentation. So maybe you can save your question for Q&A session after this. So to proceed, now I want to virtually pass my microphone to Prof. Technology Surveyor Dr. Abdul Hadi. And so please, Prof, uh, can proceed. Ada echo, Prof. Echo yang kuat.
Assalamualaikum. Ada kawan. Assalamualaikum. Dengar.
Dapat dengar, Prof, tapi macam ambil macam echo.
Dia bergaung.
Yes, ya, betul.
Saya keluar balik kan macam ni?
Sekejap saya hantar Puan Suhana ataupun Puan Niza, tolong Prof di tempat Prof. Sekejap ya. So in the meantime, maybe I can go through some question in the chat box for Surveyor Azman to answer a few questions if there if any. Okay, there is one question from Dr. Rosli, I guess. Okay, taking into account the existence of vaccine, is there any general guide of how long the market is going to absorb the present overhang residential unit?
Okay, Tuan Doctor, thank you. Can you hear me? Boleh? Okay, very good. Okay, now we are like looking at a crystal ball at this point in time. You know, it's not going to be easy for us to say how the market is going to absorb the overhang. But suffice to say that majority of the overhang is either due to the fact that it's located in a less preferred location, and the other part is of course due to the fact that the price is high and not commensurating with the value that is created for the property. So looking at that, we can say that basically the overhang will not be resolved so easily because of those factors that I've already shared with you. But what is important is that moving forward, you know, how do we actually look into all this overhang? For instance, there's a lot of affordable housing which is already in overhang by Prima and also by the certain developers' own affordable housing stock. So with that, we will know that there will be a challenge for us to actually get them to take up the overhang. And also the fact that we have this pandemic affecting the affordability in terms of funds and disposable income, this will be also affecting the absorption. But what is interesting is that moving forward, the properties will be evolving to meet the new demand requirements, and all this overhang will be looked at a different angle, perhaps to look at buy to rent, perhaps, or as a rent to buy type of arrangement for them to actually finally get people to take up the space. But I think if we are not able to buy, then perhaps rental should be the next option, and that will help the absorption. So, in terms of the period that we are going to look at, it all depends on how soon we open our borders, how soon the vaccines take their effect, and we will need a lot of tourists bringing in foreign currency, and we also need MM2H to be in place again, because now MM2H initiative has already been stopped temporarily, and MM2H is a key aspect in order for us to get foreign buyers coming in. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Dr. Rosli, for Dr. Rosli. There's another question there. Do you think that millennial lifestyle influences the demand for housing industry? Okay, may I, Tuan Dr. Shazlin, answer that?
Yes, yes.
Or are we already okay? Professor, would you like to continue? I think you can continue. Okay lah, I save this one for the last
The host.
so that they won't go away.
Still some echo going on, but I'll try my level best. Okay. Can we start now? Is it?
Yes.
Is it right? Okay. Thank you very much. Can you see my slide? Shazrin, Dr. Shazrin, can you see my slide?
Yes, yes, Prof.
Boleh ya?
We can see your slide.
Right. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. The MC, Surveyor Dr. Shazrin, the committee of this project. I understand this is a project by UMAS, by the Student Society. And I saw Dr. Nobaya, the head just now, and my colleagues, co-surveyor Azman, long lost friend, when we were in the UK once upon a time. Suhana, yeah, and of course the students and everyone in this webinar. So it's an opportunity and also an amanah given to me to share my thoughts on this topic. When I was approached to contribute in this webinar, when talking about future is something that is very challenging, because future is something that can only be predicted, and what is going to happen actually is only Allah Subhanahu wa Taala will be determining it, inshallah. So okay, and the students as well. I heard the students are also within the webinar. Okay. So this is the topic. Yeah, a lot of these materials were shared by Surveyor Azman just now. Yeah, so there might be some repetition, but I'll try to minimize it and putting it in the proper context. Yeah, but look at it as something as to reinforce the matters. Yeah, instead of pure overlapping. Some technical hiccup. Sorry about the presentation. Speaker belakang. Kena catat yang tu.
Okay, device. Speaker. Okay.
Terima kasih.
Okay, oh ya. Okay, tak apa, saya cuba cari wire. Prof ada on phone juga? Tak ada?
Phone saya tak ada.
Oh, tapi web tak ada? Ya,
Sorry about the hiccup. Semula jadi okey. Sorry. Boleh? Dia cakap Tuan-tuan. Alright. I will just continue with my presentation. I understand that you are able to hear me, although I can't hear the audience. No?
Okay, Prof.
Three contexts. We're going to look at a little bit of introduction, context, and the impact on the state. Yeah? So I think the introduction was very clearly presented by Survey Azman just now, so there's no issue there. But I would just like to highlight the issue of forecasting. Forecasting is something that that is something that is not easy to be done. Yeah, because forecasting is about future, and forecasting involves a lot of assumptions. Yeah, which might change. Something that we actually don't really know. Very obvious question is till when will this pandemic ends? Yeah, we do not actually know, and to what extent will it be hitting the people? Yeah, and how will it affect the mindset? Yeah? So I just like to highlight that it's a very difficult topic, and what I believe Survey Azman and myself will be saying is something that is based on our judgment. Yeah. Boleh cakap something tak? Saya nak make sure dia dengar. Boleh cakap tak something?
Can you hear me, Professor? Can you hear me?
Kalau cakap dengan saya boleh tak? Sebab saya pun perlu dengar.
Boleh dengar tak sekarang? Can you hear me?
Speaking tapi saya tak dengar.
Can you hear me? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Boleh tak somebody say something? Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now it's
Okay.
clear.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, alhamdulillah.
Very clear. We can hear you now. We can hear you now. Very clear.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for the technical hiccup. Okay. So forecasting is a big issue actually, and it's something that if we don't make the right forecast, we might be ending up with doing things that might not be prudent, and in certain situations it might actually create more problems. So from an academic perspective, there are a lot of techniques about forecasting, and I think this is another area of research that academia might like to anticipate. Yeah, how do we forecast? Which is very difficult, especially when we talk about the pandemic. The second aspect of forecasting that we would like to highlight here that is that the world is full of uncertainties. Yeah, and we are saying here just about the pandemic, and but when we talk about real estate, we have to look at it from a bigger worldview, because real estate is not just affected by the pandemic. There are a lot of things happening around us now about political situation, both globally and perhaps regionally and so on. Yeah? That can have an influence. We're talking about oil price as well. If you notice that there are some big issues about oil price, and the OPEC countries have been making some announcement recently. And we know for sure that things are getting worse as far as the pandemic is concerned in many parts of the world. Yeah? And it is a grave cause of concern. Yeah? So that is one thing. The third thing that I would like to talk about forecast is that we must look at it from a positive mindset. Yeah, this is ujian from Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. Yeah, there must be hikmah behind it. Yeah, and as real estate people, not only real estate professionals, and we have to look at the effects from a positive viewpoint. And this was highlighted by Surveyor Azman just now. It's about using technologies, yeah? Which is something that we know. But I think the pandemic actually is a catalyst that actually further encourage the process of change in a positive way. Digitization, for example, is something people have been talking long time ago. And to me, talking from an academia perspective, the pandemic actually, in a way, put us in a position to use the technology to the best of our ability, which is something that we might not have anticipated as soon as now. So the mindset must be clear, and we must be ready on what actions that we're going to have to take. Yeah? A lot of issues about COVID-19 relates to new norms, which have been highlighted by Azman, Surveyor Azman just now. And my slide ni dah hilang dia. I'm trying to access my slide now. Sorry about the hiccup, man. Orang berlaku ni hari ini. Sorry about the hiccup. Nampak ke slide saya?
Belum lagi, Prof.
Belum ya?
Belum lagi.
Jadi tiba-tiba dia hilang. Nampak ke?
Okey, dah start semula dah.
Nampak ya? Okay, sorry.
Ya.
Jadi kita pergi balik tadi. Saya baru start. Yeah, I just like to highlight the issue of forecasting. Philosophically, it's very important, and I'm just worried that people simply make a lot of assumptions and do things not in proper manner and so on. So there must be a lot of analysis on how to forecast properly. Yeah? So just like what Surveyor Azman has been mentioning just now, a lot of influence on real estate relates to change in people's behavior. Yeah. And this has been clearly highlighted just now, change in the lifestyle, change in the consumer's way of shopping, yeah, buying online, how it affects the retail market, yeah. And then the issue of work from home, how it affects the office space, the need for flexible remote working culture, even for universities. If I had the opportunity to also highlight, maybe university also have to adjust accordingly. Buying pattern, e-commerce, so on. So this has was very much highlighted just now by Azman, Surveyor Azman. Yeah. So the three W's, the three C's, everybody is well versed about it. Yeah. So what is most important is that it will change the way society live, behave, and obviously all this change in behavior will have an influence on our environment, on our sustainability, yeah, and all the real estate must be prepared, yeah, in terms of providing a conducive environment, be working, shopping, living, studying, and so on. So the environment must be clear, right? Must be conducive, especially towards the online norms. Yeah? And we're talking about also issue of sustainability. Yeah? How do we ensure that sustainability in terms of all the three sustainability, yeah? Economic, social, and also the social and also the environment, definitely. Yeah? So just to have a broad overview on how it affects, how the pandemic actually affects the real estate market. These are some of the summary which I think which we have heard from Surveyor Azman just now. Yeah. As far as residential market, there is some softening of the market, but generally the market is still resilient. Office market, yeah, of course, we're talking here about the workspace, yeah, and it's quite interesting, but because at one time we were talking about the issue of densification. Densification is a philosophy where people optimize the space and work close to each other. Yeah, but now it has to be revisited in view of the pandemic, where social distancing is very crucial. As far as retail is concerned, this was also been highlighted in terms of shopping habits online, and the need for shopping mall owners to have to relook at their strategies, yeah, in terms of the tenant mix, in terms of the layout, and there have a lot been discussions on to convert some parts of the retail mall, shopping mall, into distribution centers. Yeah, because people are now ordering food online, and so other goods, groceries, and what have we. Yeah, so the distribution center in a retail context is very crucial. Yeah. As far as the industrial market, the industrial market has also have to revisit on some of their technologies, yeah, in line with the IR 4.0. Yeah. We are also looking at investment market, capitals, investment models, and so on, as Surveyor Azman has been highlighting. This provides an overview, an overall overview of the impact. Yeah? But something that has also been highlighted is now we know all this new lifestyle trend is with us, and it will be translated into demand for real estate, demand for housing. All these are being talk of in town. The new millennials who go for clean lifers, which actually treasure more experience, and this might be translated into the housing design, which developers have to actually be very sensitive about, and the concept of lifestyle of borrowers, where the new generations prefer for a freer lifestyle. They don't see real estate as something that they would like to own, in the long term. So these are issues that we have to consider. Adaptive entrepreneurs, basically is about people who are very creative in the way that they're doing things. How do we translate this into real estate, especially in residential sector, designers, and also the concept of co-living, where a lot of real estate space is shared, and people like to share things like that. So all these lifestyle trend, has been happening even prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic actually provide a catalyst to speed it up, to speed up the trend. I think it's only fair for us, talking about property people, to look at the context of where the real estate market is. If we look at where we are now, we are actually, if we look at 2019, in real estate, there are recession phase, recovery, explosive, and all that. So based on data from NAPIC, we are actually on the end of the recession phase, and actually we are towards recovery. But because of this pandemic, perhaps, so the recovery might actually be, there's some lagging behind it. We have to be aware. But generally, the property is still performing. Surprisingly, I was also looking at European market. They are also performing. That shows actually something that we have learned right from the university days. When property is a long-term investment, and it's very difficult for there to be a capital depreciation as far as the investment value is concerned. So even we look at the house price, there's some softening effect due to the pandemic, perhaps, but still the house price is on the rising trend, and with a slower rate of growth. And it is also useful to look at how the housing market will perform, looking at all the crises that we have experienced before. Real estate market has been very resilient, quote unquote, in terms of preserving the investment value, even during the global financial crisis in 2002, if I'm not mistaken, due to the subprime issues, if you still remember, and then we have the very big hit on the currency issue 1998. Even though the price is going down, but it's not too bad. Generally the price is still, we are still performing. And if we look at the slowdown we are experiencing here, actually, even though there is some slowdown, but the market is still doing well in some certain areas, with some softening. This is a very interesting issue. It's about someone was asking about affordability. Will the softening in the price of houses reflect solve the problem of affordability? The answer is not a straight yes, because affordability is also reflected in the GDP, the purchasing power. The challenge that we have now, the COVID softened some of the pricing effect, especially in residential sector and also commercial. But more importantly, is our income are also affected. So, so, So that might not be actually solve the problem of affordable house price. Yeah. The affordability issue. And if we look at the history over time, I think the world has been hit by a number of pandemic. Yeah, if you remember the Nipah virus, yeah, the SARS, the swine flu, yeah, and also is also surrounded by the global financial crisis. Despite all these challenges, the price is still performing. Yeah? Although the rate of increase is lower. Yeah? I had a discussion with one of the NAPIC officers a few days ago. Generally, the transaction even has lowered down a bit, but generally the market is still performing. Yeah? So there is no big cause of worries. Yeah? But the only challenge that we might be facing is there might be a lot of NPLs, bad loans, bad debts, but that's early days to say anything on it yet. Yeah. As far as price of high-rise properties, look at data by NAPIC, there is a flattening effect here. Yeah. And this also include high-rise condominiums and so on. But generally, the market is still performing. Yeah? I would like also to highlight very interesting areas relating to trend of shopping. Yeah? And you can see that the trend of shopping through the internet, yeah, online shopping has increased dramatically. Yeah, and this has been accentuated further by the pandemic. Yeah? So this actually support what Surveyor Hasman is actually highlighted is now the need for the retail players, especially in the real estate, to respond accordingly. I think we cannot actually separate the effect on the market with the strategy of the business. Yeah? What is more important is that the fact the pandemic is hitting the business actually will need a very good, sound business continuity strategy. This is also another area of research. Perhaps you can team up with the people from the business discipline. Yeah, we also have to look at workforce ability, and so now all these aspects have some bearing on the real estate. Yeah, and some another areas that might be affected by the pandemic. Besides the business strategy, the business way of doing things, the business modeling, translated into layout of shopping, layout of office space, and so on, is areas related to property management and facilities management. We have to look at aspects like cleaning, security, and so on. This must be done in a very rigorous way. And I think the impact is also on corporate real estate. Yeah, corporate real estate means properties that belongs to companies, especially. And the corporate strategy must be in place now to foresee what's going to happen. We have to plan for re-entry. We have to plan for safety, the resilience and operations. We have to plan in terms of the workspace, the materials that we use. Yeah, and also to boost up the employees' experience. You know that if you look at what's happening around us, there are many employees that are under some level of stress, and they need to be supported. As far as CRE strategy, perhaps we have to think about space that allow this to happen. Yeah, we also have to look into corporate real estate, have to look into digital workplace, ensure smart building, using technology, and we have to look at issues of responding for the near term, recovering in the short term, and also to thrive, prepare for the new normal in the long term. So actually the corporate people must be thinking very hard, and I'm sure they are, to strategize accordingly, on the timeline basis. As far as the office sector is concerned, mentioned earlier, we need a more flexible space, amid all this remote working culture that is actually with us, and we expect actually in the future, even though when the COVID is no longer around us, this is a prediction. Many corporations, organizations will have a hybrid way of working. So it will be a blend between working physical at the office or at whatever place of work, blended by the remote working using computers, technology, and so on. As far as retail, to re-emphasize what we have mentioned just now, there must be a more flexible omni-channel retail models. The retailers cannot simply use on one model; they need to look at it from various types of models. Combining the technology and the traditional way of retailing. There must be structural change in the retail market. A more flexible retailers need to rethink about their supply chains, their sustainable fulfillment. Perhaps the retailers will need to be having partnership with the landlords. Have a lot of discussion on it. What's best for us? And because we are in it together, there must be an upmarket retailers. Looking for new opportunities. And also, there must be also ways of clearing surplus stock. As far as the logistic area is concerned, the supply chain risk mitigation and resilience will need to be improved, perhaps. The logistic area, hospitality. Now a lot of hotels are having rethinking of strategy. What's best, and even now we are also looking at the virtual tourism experience, something that is very much in store for researchers to look into. Living sectors, student housing, and so on, and managing the health impacts and so on. Since I'm in the academia, I think it would be useful for me. This is an entirely personal opinion on how educational real estate should be looked at, be strategized, and also we're also looking at the frontliners working in hospitals. How hospitals should reshape themselves, the healthcare, tourism, just to re-emphasize. As far as educational institutions is concerned, I believe the ministry is working hard together with the universities to come up with strategies. The strategy seems to be very dynamic and need to consider factors relating to the stakeholders, the students, the staff, and also the parents, communities, and so on. So we might look at a plan for adaptable hybrid environment existence. At the moment, a lot of teaching is taking place online. But what do we expect things post-COVID? Will the online teaching still continue, or will there be a hybrid environment? I foresee that a hybrid environment would be quite healthy. We can still have the face-to-face as well as benefiting from the online technology. But we need to strategize accordingly, looking at issues of space, to rethink about the space in universities, in schools, and there could be issues of looking at how our real estate space can support the hybrid setup for digital and physical teaching and learning, research, and so on. the other aspect that universities might also consider is about the opportunity for to establish virtual communities. Yeah, and issue of virtual communities should be something that should be developed further, where the universities can actually collaborate and have a lot of fruitful programs with the university benefiting from the online technology. So this is in areas of infrastructure of higher education, or even schools that might be useful to be considered. Yeah. And the other aspect to universities' infrastructure is to have a flexible infrastructure that is able to adapt to uncertainty. Yeah, and we should actually celebrate the shifts in technology, the shifts in cleaning practices, and what is most important is the preparedness for us to adopt to the new norms, yeah, and use the new standards of hygiene and high expectations from the stakeholders. Yeah. And one issue that is quite critical is about equitable access to technology. Yeah? As far as we are concerned, and we know some of our students are not living within an area that have good internet access. That is something that university might have to look into on how to address the issue from a real estate strategic perspective. Yeah? Issue of cleaner environment, sustainability, yeah? And most importantly is also higher institution might also be looking at emergency preparedness, yeah, and to look at suitable emergency preparedness models that can actually prepare ourselves to meet these challenges. Yeah? And we are not just talking about a one-off kind of thing. So we might not know what's going to happen in the future. And the other strategy that universities or higher institutions or even schools might like to consider is to leverage best practices learned through virtual engagement. Yeah? I'm sure through the period of online teaching, there are a lot of useful experience between us that we might like to share and perhaps sit down together and come up and perhaps sit down with the students and the stakeholders, come up with a strategy on how we can rebuild, redesign the campus, yeah, to suit the new requirement. Even we are looking, some countries are even looking at esports training, digital learning, yeah, which we have done now, but how can real estate actually facilitate this trend in a positive way? Yeah? As far as hospitals is concerned, this is a very important and crucial strategic resources of the nations. We have to consider resilient hospitals, yeah, in terms of the strategic asset, facilities management for disaster risk preparedness. Previously, people have been talking a lot about disaster in terms of the physical disaster like earthquakes, and a lot of literature on that. But this health, especially issues of pandemic, will have to be put in context to improve our strategic SNFM. Yeah, green facilities maintenance. I heard there is a research going on. Innovative space planning of hospital. Yeah. We have to consider about the plethora of pandemic situations. We're not just talking about COVID-19. We also have other very crucial needs of people, yeah, and digital engagement with healthcare. So these are issues that real estate, as far as hospital, might like to have a rethink about, and of course issues of tourism, because tourism is a sector that was badly hit by the pandemic, and we have to be prepared to come up with safety innovations. And I would like to propose the concept of virtual tourism and how real estate can contribute towards the development of virtual tourism to be to be considered in detail. So looking beyond the pandemic, just a few more slides I have. To wrap things up, we also have to look at, there will be a lot of corporate outsourcing. There will be a lot of outsourcing activities, yeah. There will be a lot of the demand for workplace design, flexible working solutions, issue of safety, um, and from a bigger perspective, real estate also have to think about the issue of urbanization, how the maybe town planning should be designed to cope with these kind of challenges. Yeah, there are a lot of issues now about relocating the office to suburb area, the preference of people to relocate themselves not at urban centers. This might actually free some of the space and release the condensed environment that we are facing in the urban areas. Issue of technology definitely is something that we have to be concerned about. We have to be, but lastly, before I wrap things up, what is most important despite all this? How are we going to change to the new norm? Yeah. So another issue that is very important here is a change management. How do we, as a whole, come up with a change management strategy? Yeah, and I believe the change management will vary according to sector uh, and to the stakeholders because the future is uncertain. So change management is something that need to be considered in a positive way, and maybe we have to look at it from a stage process, models by Lewin, for example, that look at change as a process. How do we react to the pandemic? How do we develop into a resilient real estate? How do we recover? And how do we adjust to the new norm in a positive way, gracefully? So, sorry if I'm taking your time, but to wrap things up, we know for sure that pandemic, COVID-19 has a very big effect on the property market. Yeah, and we believe that the effect on the property market, especially in the change on the new norms, yeah, and so on, will need to be looked at it. Will need to be looked from a positive point of view, yeah? As a way of further improving ourselves and maybe to take the real estate to the next level. That's about it. Thank you very much. Sorry if I'm exceeding the time. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Prof. Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Technology Surveyor Dr. Abdul Hadi Nawawi, for an interesting insight about about our real estate sector. I think Prof. Hadi has leveled up our discussion today, and from the eyes of an academic, I am sure Prof. Hadi has delivered his thought and make us uh, pondering his point, and I think uh, there were some serious notes in his presentation just now, where it reminds us that um, property and our lifestyle should be changed in accordance to the situation that we are facing right now. Okay, now, okay, both of our panelists have presented, uh, has done their presentation. So we are now in the Q&A session. Okay, and looking at the chatting box here, there are several questions. Okay, maybe. All right. The first question: do you think the millennial lifestyle influences the demand for housing industry? That question is from Dr. Rosli, and I think Surveyor Azman has answered the questions in the chatting box. Is there anything that you want to add, Surveyor Azman or Prof Hadi, about the millennial lifestyle? If no, then I will proceed to.
Let me say something about lifestyle.
Mhm.
Yeah. I look at it from a philosophical viewpoint. Yeah. There are two ways of looking at lifestyle. Should we actually adjust real estate to meet the new lifestyle, or it can work the other way around? Philosophically, can real estate actually influence or the lifestyle of the millennials to to make it more meaningful? Um, are you with me? So real estate can the first approach is to respond to the lifestyle. The other way is to educate their lifestyle, quote unquote. I'm actually looking at it from another perspective. Yeah. Um, for example, if you look at I did a research some years ago on the layout of the university, yeah, and how it influenced the students' way of living, yeah, uh, from a knowledge sharing perspective, yeah. Um, if we respond totally to the students' preference, sometimes we might overlook that. Maybe we are not saying who is right, who is wrong. We need more we need more leisure areas, for example. But we as a decision maker or administrator or manager can also blend the need for more leisure with the need for more academic, scholarly discussion in terms of knowledge sharing. That's one thing. Another issue that was highlighted in the research some years ago was about the location of the rooms of the academia, the professors, lecturers, with the classrooms, for instance. Yeah, many of the design was responding to people's requirement. We want privacy. We want separations between students' activities with lecturers, issue of privacy, and so on. But we look at it from a knowledge management perspective. We respect that preference, but maybe we can inject some values in that in terms of having communal areas where knowledge sharing between lecturers can be enhanced with students and so on. Are you with me? So it's a philosophical answer. You can respond or you can educate plus respond. That's my view. Okay.
Okay. And get to all participants, if you have any questions, you can ask directly to our panels. You can just switch on your mic and ask directly to our panels. Okay, now, okay, next question. I'm reading from the chat box. Okay, it's either way, whether you write the questions in the chat box or you can ask directly uh, to our panels. Okay. From Dr. Hilmi Masri, Surveyor Azman, do you think that budget 2021 will help first-time home buyer to purchase house? How will lower the cost of purchases, and will the property developers interested to sell these houses at lower price? And Surveyor Azman once again has replied the answer in the chat box. Prof Hadi, do you have anything to add to this question?
Can you repeat the question?
Regarding
So clear.
budget 2021,
Okay.
will the incentive reduce the cost of purchasing the house?
Yeah. It's early days to say yet, but we have to look at it from a multitude of dimensions. Yeah, one is the incentive provider, but purchasing a house is not just like purchasing any other goods. Yeah, consideration that must be taken on board when we talk about purchasing a house. There are a plethora of factors that need to be considered, like the growth potential, yeah, like the what's the business prospect of me to get to sustain my income, yeah. So it's a very much a long term issue, and this must be considered. But I was talking to some industrial players, and from their point of view, we need the incentive and so on might have influence, but how much it will actually affect depends on many other factors. But it's a useful thing. You know? I think what the government has been doing with all the incentive, PGT, moratorium, and so on, it has been going down well with the public. But issue of buying or not is a very deep issue. It's more than just that incentives.
Yeah. How about the developers? With those incentive, and probably the developers have to reduce the selling price. How about the supply side? Are the developers are still willing to develop? Is it this is the right time to develop and offer their products to the market from the developers' perspective?
Maybe I can answer that, Tuan
Yeah, yeah.
Doctor.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if we were to observe what has been happening the last couple of years, since 2019, it was clear that affordable housing is being required in the market. A lot of developers decided to go develop smaller units to make it affordable. But by doing so, they are actually competing with the affordable housing units, which are compulsory to be provided either under by Prima or by the developers as part of their development order requirements. So by doing that, there was actually a competition for mass properties, for mass market properties in terms of price affordability. Now, when you look at the units that were actually done up to meet the affordable housing bracket, you will be able to see that the units are quite small, anywhere between 400 plus square feet right up to about 500 plus square feet only. And this is just a gimmick by the developer to make it affordable. Okay, but of course, in actual fact, when you look at the situation in the market at the moment, the struggle is to get the loan. Okay, but the good thing about buying new properties is that the developer will work harder to get you the loan. Okay, and this is where actually the secondary market has actually more or less lagged behind because there was no incentive for the people to actually buy from the secondary market sub sale. And what is interesting is that when you asked just now, Tuan Dr. Shazrin, whether or not developers are actually building more of these, we can actually safely note that according to the recent interview with Datuk Som, who is actually the president of REDA Malaysia, he actually mentioned that most of the developments are now at the finishing stage. That means they are about to be completed, and some of them have already been taken up by up 70%, 80%. As again, I like to stress here, a lot of the unabsorbed stock is actually from those which are have been developed by Prima themselves, located in very, very difficult locations, not attractive at all without any public transportation, as well as those which are actually more or less unsuitable, for the lifestyle that millennials are looking for. Okay, the fact that you cannot choose your unit in Prima housing also has deterred a lot of purchasers, especially millennials who are actually wanting to have their own mind and their own choice when buying properties. Okay, and I think moving forward, it would be apparent that properties which are price affordable will still be taken up, provided that they are actually located in prime location. And prime location, when we talk about it, it's not about being in the center of Kuala Lumpur or in prime location of Mont Kiara or Bangsa or Damansara. It's more about being close to public transportation, namely LRT and KTMB and future LRT lines as well. And also the fact that a lot of land has been unlocked because of the development of highways. This will also be sought after by young families who need to actually get to highways and main roads to reach their workplace faster. And those who cannot afford to buy cars, they will need public transportation. So I think all in all, moving forward, mass market products are still being sought after, and developers will continue to do so, but they must have certain USPs, as I mentioned in my presentation, to package together with their products so that moving forward, um, the purchasers are getting more value for money. Thank you.
All right. Um, a question from
Excuse me, can I
Irfan.
ask a
Uh,
question?
Yes, okay, please.
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Okay, Rafadi, I want to ask, there is one point that you mentioned before is something related to the disaster on property.
Mhm.
Is it just now, Prof, you are mentioning about the disaster risk in property
Yeah.
on your explanations?
Yeah.
So my question is, how do we can encourage the developers on the new developments to take into account the element of disaster? Like we know nowadays, for example, like these few days, flooded is happens in few areas. So this considered as a one element of disaster.
Yeah.
So in future, how can the government or maybe the developer, before they do the development, they take into this, they took these elements on the development?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think the finger should not just be pointing to the developers. Yeah, and I think it's about we as a whole we have to be looking at possibility of scrutinizing the prospect of this disaster to take place. Yeah, as far as planning is concerned, we already have procedure in place like EIA for certain projects. We need to get approval from the EIA perspective, but this have some limitations to certain types of projects. Yeah, depending on the size of the project and so on. But the disaster I was highlighting just now was in terms of pandemic actually. Pandemic can also be considered a disaster from crisis perspective. Yeah, but if you open it up, the disaster from a very big perspective, then there must be a disaster management planning. Yeah, from all stages, right from the identification of the site, right from the process of construction till the handing over of the projects themselves. Yeah, so disaster can happen anytime. It's not just when the project is completed and so on. It can happen even during construction, post construction, and if you look at companies, disaster is not only limited to physical disaster, can also be related to non-financial disaster, yeah, affecting the business continuity of that particular corporation. So to answer your question, there must be a disaster management plan by the developers and the authorities involved must be. The procedures are in place actually, but they are limited to certain types of projects. So maybe we can extend the requirement to larger projects. But disaster management is not just only about house construction. We're also talking about pandemic as a form of quote unquote disaster, yeah, that need a proper proactive plan transferred into very clear documents that make us more prepared. Sebenarnya dah ada dah sebenarnya disaster management, tetapi we need to refine it further.
Okay.
Dan many institution dipanggil risk management. Ya, risk tu dia broad sikit. Disaster tu is a very special types of risk that involve very big impact on the organization. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay. That questions coming from Puan Siti Hafsah Zulkarnain. Maybe I want to take this opportunity to congratulate her because she just passed her PhD Viva last Monday. Okay, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. Next question from Irfan Izzi. Yeah, with the interest rate OPR being at all-time low, will it affect the changes in the property market, especially the prices? I believe the borrowing rate will have some significant reduction, but in terms of the house price, maybe not so.
Okay, Tuan Doctor, if I may add.
Yeah.
Okay, basically the OPR works, works quite well in order to ensure that the lending rates are low, and also basically you need to understand the base rate or the base lending rate previously known, plus a spread of margin makes up the rate that you have to pay. Of course, it is opportune now for us to take advantage of this rate, okay, to refinance our properties. Okay, some of us could have actually been taking loans the last 5 years ago. It has to be a minimum of 5 years ago at maybe higher rates, and basically with the OPR down so low now, you are able to refinance. That means getting the amount of money a lot more, but with the same kind of repayment that you have to do per month. I can share with you back in 2011, 2012, 2010, 2011, when we had the first time the base lending rate at that time dropping so low. It fell as much as 4.5% to 5%, okay, at that time. And most of us who took a loan for at least 10 years before that were paying something like 8 to 9%. So you imagine for the same amount of loan that we have to pay to the bank, we managed to actually pare down our loan amount, and at the same time get a surplus. I still remember I had cash 300,000 suddenly immediately, and basically I had to pay the same amount every month. So by doing that, because of the rise in the value of a property, it gives us a bit more open market value on top, and that allows us to get a bit more cash. But unfortunately, the current situation, a lot of properties may not have actually gone up in value so much the last few years. Some have been very stagnant. So in order for you to do refinancing, you really have got to look at what sort of value you can achieve with the property and how much you've been paying all this while in order to get that margin of cash surplus that you should be able to do. And in terms of pricing, unfortunately at the moment, as you know, if nobody is buying, prices will not go up so fast. Okay, that means lack of demand causes the property values or property prices to adjust accordingly, according to the free market. So less demand, the prices will not go up so much. More demand, hopefully it will go up. So that's why I think at this point in time, only certain locations which are sought after by purchasers will see stabilization of the price, and some maybe even a bit of appreciation, but not too much. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay. Another question from Dr. Rosli to Prof. Hadi. how do you compare the present pandemic situation to the SARS pandemic back in 2002, 2004? And do you think the same market behavior will be observed? If yes, how do you clarify? Because there was no overhang issue during the SARS.
I think one thing about the pandemic, the SARS, in terms of the extent is not as severe as what we experienced during this COVID-19. Yeah? So the impact was very much localized. Yeah? They are not something that has been seen as a widespread global issue. It tends to be patchy, yeah, rather than when we talk about this pandemic, COVID-19 is a long-term issue, yeah, and very uncertain. The graveness of the impact is felt throughout the whole system. Yeah? So to answer your question, yes, SARS, we managed to recover pretty quickly. One is because of the extent of the pandemic. But generally, when we talk about COVID-19, is more extensive. Yeah, and the uncertainty surrounding it, I think that's the bigger issue. When SARS, they're more under control. Even with this vaccine in place, there are still a lot of uncertainty happening around it. Yeah, when with SARS, we managed to overcome it pretty quickly. Yeah, so that is, I think that is an answer that you would expect from most of us. Yeah, but having said that, if we look at the performance of the property market as a whole, there has not been a very clear drop. Yeah, even if you look at the figure, there's some softening in the rate of increase. But the property market has been responding very well. Yeah? So there is no kind of loss in investment value as far as we are concerned. The only concern is that the length. If the length is too long, then it might affect the ability of people to repay their loans. When people are not able to repay their loans, we are not just talking about housing loan. We're talking about so many types of loan. There will be more NPLs. The financial standing of the people will be affected. The businesses are also affected. So it will just trickle down towards the whole system. Yeah, but how much the effect will be is very uncertain. The issue of uncertainty is one of the biggest issues as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Because we cannot predict what is going to happen, and the longer it happens, and the less able we are able to adjust accordingly, then it will just hit harder on the pockets of people, on the pockets of businesses. When this happens, the economy will be affected. Yeah, so COVID-19 is more than just a health issue. It's very much an economic issue. And that is why I think most government, even our government, despite the rise in the number of new cases, we have to be, doing things in a right perspective by allowing business to take place with very strict, stringent SOPs and so on. We have no choice actually. Yeah?
Okay, all right. There's another question from Mikael. Regarding the recovery. Okay, how long when the property recover after this COVID-19? And Surveyor Azman has answered the question in the chat box. Okay, so basically the answer, it depends on the economic activity and also the political stability, and also the opening of the borders for tourism purposes. The sooner we achieve the aforementioned, the faster the recovery. And also regarding the property bubble, the market in Malaysia seems to be resilient so far. The prices have been quite stable without much significant drop. With the government assistance and bank support, the market will not face any burst for the time being. All right. So is there any questions from the participants? Maybe one last question.
I think I just come back to the developers. I think
Ah.
the developers, if they look at it from a positive mindset, they might be not forced but encouraged to be more creative in the way that they do things, yeah? As far as the size of units, the location of the units, yeah, and the pricing strategy, yeah. And not only that, if we're looking at from the perspective of the construction industry, yeah, construction should be more, they have the move towards higher productivity using technology like IBS, mass production, so on should be ventured into further. So this is a time for developers to consider construction from a positive angle. Mind you, I think one of the challenges that we face during COVID-19 is foreign labor. Yeah? And this is a very big challenge to developers. This is the right time for us, not only developers, for us as a nation to think collaboratively. How can we solve the problem of foreign laborers? Maybe through technology, maybe through other supply chain approaches, yeah, new business models, and so on. So we started off by saying that pandemic is ujian from Allah. We have to look at it from a hikmahnya, yeah. It's a time for us to move on, perhaps to the next level.
Okay, all right. Maybe last question from there is one question from Nulisha to Surveyor Azman. In current situation where most of the big business is going down and the option that this business uh, have to sell their property but remain in their business, is there any opportunity for REIT to acquire such property because it's already provide with ready tenant under sale and leaseback transaction? Probably REITs company acquire property that already tenanted in order to save the owner, the building owner. Is that
Okay. Yes, Tuan Doctor. When we talk about REIT, REIT is actually deriving the revenue from the rental or revenue that is generated from the securitized properties that they own. Okay, so basically, when they want to acquire certain properties, it has to be of a certain significant value, and the return is also over and above their cost of fund. Their cost has to be lower than the return that they have to get because of the fact that they have to pay dividends. Some of them are paying dividend 4 times a year. Okay, now there could be opportunities if the owner is willing to do a sell and lease back and lock in a certain return on investment based rental that will help the REIT to also at the same time generate enough revenue to pay dividends. Okay, the issue always is that if it's a small shop with little opportunity of upside in terms of rental value appreciation as well as the rental itself, rental growth. It can be quite unattractive for the REIT. Now, the other part which we have to understand is that a lot of deals now are done on GRR basis, guaranteed rental return. Some are also termed as a revenue sharing scheme, whereby investors purchase the property and lease them back to the developer, who in turn park it under an operator and promising a certain return on investment for such an arrangement. Normally, they will lock in anywhere between 5 to 10 years. Okay. Now, based on this part, we are already seeing a lot of failures in such projects, because at the end of the day, because of poor management by the operator or the lack of business and creativity in leasing out the space, there is no return. There's no money that can be actually paid out to the investors. A lot of GRR developers now are in default, actually, and it's very rare to find one which actually is very successful in this arrangement. So, having that in mind, it is very clear then, to rescue the business is one part, but the fact that the return can be guaranteed for a certain period of time is also very important. As you know, any such injection into a REIT will require the approval of the Securities Commission. And Securities Commission is very concerned about risk factor. Okay, and also the fact that there could be even the risk of the tenant or the retailer actually closing down at the end of the day and leaving the space empty, but walking away with the purchase price. This has happened before. Hypermarkets have been known to terminate their tenancy agreements quite early, and some REITs have been affected by this. Okay, so REIT business is a bit more, I would say, risk averse. If the study is not done well. At the same time, also, given the pandemic now, there's a lot of other things that investors will have to consider in the future. Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. I think um, that is the last question, the final question. Okay. Okay. So maybe before, okay, I think we should end our webinar. But before we end our webinar session, may I ask all the participants to switch on your camera so that we can take picture. Okay, screenshot session. Okay, we're going to have a screenshot session. Okay, all right.
Tak boleh on video je tu Ustaz.
Tak on video, tapi kami nampak muka apa.
Okay, boleh. Okay.
Alright, okay. Okay, right. Okay, maybe Puan Hasniza yang membantu juga boleh ambil gambar juga. Okay, setakat yang ada.
Okey.
Okay.
Kita mula yang pertama. Okey, 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, saya rasa
Dah okay.
okay.
Alright. Okay, we are very glad because our participants today lebih 200 orang, more than 200 participants today. And okay, so we are very happy. Okay, on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to say thank you to Surveyor Azman Shah and Prof. Technology Surveyor Dr. Abdul Hadi for accepting our invitation and to become the panelists for this webinar. And also thank you for your time and willingness to give input and answering all the questions from the participants. Also, the organizing committee want to thank to all the participants for joining this webinar and stay with us until the end of the session. We hope everybody is getting benefits from this webinar and hoping to see you again in our next webinar on the 22nd of January 2021. About that webinar, we are still in the preparation stage and we'll disseminate the information soon. And don't forget to fill up the attendance form. Okay, you can find the link in the chat box. Okay, with that, I end our webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Saya Azrin, saya Azman.
Okay, alright.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very
Assalamualaikum
much,
semua.
Surya Azman.
New
Thank you
Year.
very much, Prof.
Take care.
Sama.
Ya,
Stay
mungkin
safe.
Dr. Nubayah ada
Stay safe.
ada nak say something?
Tak apalah. Dah thank you tadi.
Sampai lagi.
It's okay. Awak tadi dah cakap kan? Okay.
Ya, awal tadi.
Okay. Terima kasih semua. Terima kasih yang
Thank you.
attend. Terima
Bye.
kasih moderator dan juga semua AJK yang terlibat lah.
Okay, Azman Shah signing off. Thank you.
Okay,
Assalamualaikum.
thank you so much. Okay, waalaikumsalam.
Assalamualaikum.